This week on Wham Bam Dashcam, we've got perilous pileups, pickups hitting pickups, convenient cops, miscalculated momentum, red light runners, criminals caught on camera, and more. Hang on tight. Natalie was headed to work on a sunny California morning when she witnessed a brutal four-vehicle collision as she made her way toward downtown San Diego. When traffic in the passing lane came to a stop, the driver of a Ram pickup didn't react quickly enough before plowing into a car. The car was pushed into the back of an SUV, which lifted off the ground as it spun. The SUV then collided with a Tesla Model 3. Natalie pulled over to assist the victims, and she told us she had to pry the white car's door open so the driver could exit. Thankfully, nobody was seriously injured. Natalie gave her contact info to the responding police and provided copies of her dashcam footage to the involved drivers. She thinks the car and the SUV were probably totaled by the collision. Wade and his girlfriend were on their way to Capernaum Studios to check out one of the filming locations for the TV series The Chosen. Suddenly, they watched one pickup driver go off-road to avoid colliding with another.
Oh my God. Oh.
Why did he do that?
The evasive maneuver wasn't effective in avoiding a collision, and the first pickup rear-ended the second and shoved it into a ditch. Wade pulled over to check on the drivers while his girlfriend called 911. Wade told us nobody was seriously injured and first responders arrived very quickly. He gave a copy of his dashcam footage to one of the police officers, and they were impressed by the quality of his VIOFO A229 Pro. By the way, that's the exact model of dashcam we recommend, which is why Wade bought it. He'd had it for a month before this happened. If you need a dashcam, check out the description for exclusive discounts just for our fans. Dremden was waiting patiently for a traffic light to change, and when it did, he started making his protected left turn as indicated by the green arrow. An oncoming driver decided it was actually his turn as he ran his red light. The police officer in the lane next to Dremden was not about to let that slide. He made a U-turn in front of Dremden and took off after the red light runner to deliver a fresh serving of instant justice. Dremden and his wife had a good laugh about the situation while continuing on their way home. He told us they're both big fans of all our videos and they look forward to them every weekend. If you do too, consider subscribing. Gabriel was on his way to work when he noticed the driver of a car ahead of him jockeying from lane to lane and tailgating other vehicles. Watch what happened as they approached a traffic light that was about to turn red.
Yeah, go get him. Go get her. Woo!
When the box truck ahead of the tailgater continued through a freshly red light, so did the tailgater, probably unaware of his offense since he'd been following so closely. Sadly for him, a police officer was fully aware. Party lights, instant justice, you know the drill. Gabriel continued on his way to work before texting his brother Noah, another fan of our channel, to let him know he finally had a submission for Wham Bam Dashcam. Zach was on his way to pick up pizzas in his Nissan Leaf when he watched another driver cut through an open gap in traffic, and it didn't look like this was the first time this driver had made this lapse in judgment.
Guy, that's probably how that happened in the first place.
Obviously, that driver should not have proceeded before it was clear, but I can't help but notice this wouldn't have happened at all if the driver of the pickup truck hadn't yielded the right-of-way. Close the gap. There is absolutely no reason to leave an opening for someone to exit a parking lot, and doing so will only pressure other drivers into doing something reckless, like turning onto a road where they can't see traffic. Needlessly yielding the right-of-way when not required may seem like a helpful gesture, but it isn't courteous, it's dangerous. Close the gap. Danielle was driving down a one-way road when she noticed another driver was about to run a red light. Even though she honked to warn them, the other driver didn't even start braking until it was already too late.
Should know, should pay attention.
The other car collided with a silver Toyota less than a second before the light changed. Whether impatient or distracted, their actions definitely caused them to arrive late to their destination, if at all. Patrick is another fan who took our dashcam recommendation, and he sent us this footage from his VIOFO A229 Plus. His family was on their way to a field hockey game when they watched a speeder get instant justice. Patrick told his daughter Evie, who gets upset whenever he watches our videos without her, that he'd get a pair of Wham Bam decals for his Jeep if this submission made it into an episode. The purchase link is in the description, Patrick.
That might be good enough for Wham Bam, Evelyn.
Paul watched the driver of a Honda Civic take out 2 BMWs with one bad decision. The Civic driver made a left turn across traffic to reach a parking lot, but an oncoming BMW didn't have time to avoid colliding with her. It then rolled into Paul's BMW, incurring $4,000 in damage. While Paul's BMW was repairable, the green one was totaled by the collision. Paul told us the owner told him he'd only owned it for 4 months. Casey was riding his Goldwing motorcycle with wife in tow when they experienced a seriously scary close call. An SUV driver ahead merged into Casey's lane without yielding from a part of the road they shouldn't have been in the first place. Casey swerved around them in the oncoming lane, then had to swerve back to avoid a pickup truck. Thanks to his training, Casey and his wife survived the ordeal, but he told us they had to change their pants after regaining their composure. Jim was headed home after a graveyard shift when his Toyota RAV4 was suddenly struck by a car running a red light. The impact spun Jim's RAV4 completely around, but he noted that if he hadn't had his foot on the brakes, things could have been much worse. Both drivers stopped and contacted the police. Jim told us that when the cops arrived, the other driver told them that he had a green light and that Jim had run a red. When they found out he was uninsured, he claimed it was his mother's car. Jim showed them his dashcam footage, and officers wrote the other driver 3 citations for running a red light, driving without insurance, and driving without a license. Yikes! The cops also told Jim that without his dashcam footage, they would have assigned 50% blame to each driver. Jim has filed a claim with his own insurance provider and is now waiting for his vehicle to get fixed. Catherine captured a Tesla behaving badly when a red Model Y cruised through a red light, and watch closely because it happens fast.
That Tesla man can't drive.
Did you see it? Catherine's traffic light had already turned green by the time the Tesla driver drove through the intersection. Thankfully, the other drivers were paying better attention and no collision occurred. This submitter is a delivery driver who was a minute away from a drop-off when a blue Corvette made a left turn across another lane, clipping a black sedan and sending it into a wall. Our submitter hurried to complete his delivery before returning to the scene of the collision. He told us first responders had already arrived, and he gave a statement and a copy of his dashcam video to the police. Blink and you'll miss it. This submitter was preparing to make a left turn through an intersection when a cyclist ran his red light and almost got run over. Only by slamming on the brakes was our submitter able to avoid disaster. Thankfully, even though the reckless cyclist wasn't even wearing a helmet, this ended up being nothing more than a frightening close call. This submitter, another who took our dashcam recommendation, watched the driver next to her run a red light and T-bone a Camaro. Our submitter told us this was the first time she's ever witnessed a collision. Sadly, the driver responsible fled the scene, but our submitter provided her dashcam footage to the victims in the Camaro after calling 911. Later that day, they contacted her to let her know that her footage had been the key piece of evidence needed to track down the driver and hold her responsible. Awesome! William watched two reckless drivers try to race each other from a traffic light, but a police officer was not about to let them get away with that.
Oh, right in front of the cops, too. I'm gonna save this one.
The cop lit up his party lights, ultimately pulling over the Mustang while the Dodge Charger sadly got away. William told us he found out from the police that the Mustang driver was arrested and his vehicle impounded for street racing. Terry was driving home after work when another driver suddenly merged into his lane, clipping his front bumper and sending her car spinning out of control. Thankfully for her, the other drivers on the highway at the time were paying better attention to their surroundings and avoided running into her until she regained control. Both drivers pulled over before Terry called law enforcement. As you might have guessed, the cops found the other driver responsible for causing the collision. Brian and his wife were on their way home after spending a day in the Idaho mountains when the drivers of a couple of pickup trucks, one pulling a trailer with a side-by-side on it, grew impatient with his Prius's acceleration. The second pickup, the one pulling the trailer, forced an oncoming pickup onto the shoulder to avoid a head-on collision. Moments later, all three drivers ended up right next to each other at a traffic light. They just passed through a construction zone with a 45-mile-per-hour speed limit, and something tells me those pickup drivers would have ignored that limit if not for Brian being in their way. Armando was headed home after a long day of delivering packages when a white car went speeding past him before losing control and sideswiping a pickup truck. After colliding with the Ford F-150, the driver of the white car sped off, making this a hit and run. Armando flagged down the pickup driver and provided him with a copy of his dashcam footage. Sadly, the car's license plate number can't be deciphered from the footage, but at least the pickup driver can use this video to show his insurance provider what really happened. Armando said, "Get a dashcam." This submitter encountered a very confused deer. After he slowed down to avoid hitting it, the deer ran in front of him on the road for a while, apparently using our submitter's headlights to see where it was going. The deer eventually bounded off the road and into a field. Before you bound off to watch something else, be sure to check out this video that you, yes you, haven't seen yet. You can also check out our newest episode here, and don't forget to subscribe so you'll see every new episode in your feed.
Wham! Bam, we got a Patreon man. Please support the show.